press the red button.
Got it.
You probably need to point the microphone at whoever's talking.
This little sucker?
That little thing.
Alrighty.
So we're in the car on the way back from our second trip to Niagara area, peninsula, what do you call it? Region.
Yeah.
There you go, Niagara Region. Third trip, first time we went to Short Hills. Then the next time we did some of the Bruce Trail near
Balls Falls.
And then this time we did a bit more of the trail that links into Short Hills, round St. Catharines, kind of university really. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, you're forgetting that last time we also did the one, is it Mud Lake?
Oh yeah.
Which is just north of Port Colborne.
Yeah, there's that one as well. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's start at the beginning. Our first visit to Short Hills.
Short Hills.
On an unusually hot day. In what, April? We had a couple of days of 30-degree weather.
Yeah, and we went riding in the middle of it. So Short Hills is on the Niagara escarpment. And it's pretty close to St. Catharines. If you look at the map, you might think it's a city or part of the city. You turn up and it's quite a bit wilder than you expect, or I expected anyway. Would you agree?
For sure.
The day we rode, there's quite a few trees down still from the storm from a few weeks before, and I guess for the first few kilometres it could be said that it feels a little bit dull and boring.
Yeah, it was really muddy too.
There's that. But that Short Hills set of trails in particular is interesting because it's so varied. You go from like deciduous trees to pine forest to farmers' land to river and waterfall to magical set of waterfalls that's in the middle of the Short Hills area, and I can't remember the name of the trail. I will look it up and put it in the link.
Swayze something?
Swayze's, yeah, and then wasn't there one called Walnut or something? Walnut? Something like that? I can't remember. I need to look it up. But
I think the one prior to going to the falls where we were along that little stream and we stopped and put our feet and our hands in, that was one of my favorite spots. More so even than the falls, actually.
yeah, that kind of, and especially once the trees open up, or go green, it'll be a very lovely spot, I think. A little bit wintry and muddy feeling.
True.
Yeah, so you ride a mixture of, start off from one of the car parks. Again, I'll put the link in where we started. You have to be careful not to end up on the hiking trail because it's a little bit tricky to navigate to start with, but you start off with like, I guess, broadleaf trees. By now there's going to be leaves out, but when we did it there was no leaves on them, and it was quite muddy, quite a lot of trees down. And then just at the point where somebody says, oh, there's no rock, I want more rock, it gets more rocky. And then you end up in a farmer's field, then there's some like chutes that you come down, and then you end up in pine forest. I found a bit misleading was the one or two of the trails you come to car parks and washrooms that look like the car park and washroom or outhouse we started at. Do you remember? We kind of
I was going to say, make sure you know which parking lot you park at.
Otherwise you have an extra 2.5 kilometers to ride.
And they all look a little the same. Several that we popped out of we thought were ours, and it was not.
That's true.
Drop a pin.
Put it in the bin. So that's Short Hills, and then the next time we came down we went to
Mud Lake?
Yeah, which is some trails near Port Colborne.
Yes. Is that even the name of it?
I think Mud Lake is at the top of it, and then Port Colborne is at the start of it.
It's close to.
And it's a weird place because you basically are in the town and next to the canal, and then there is, I guess, really two really well-built mountain bike trails, and then quite a few kind of offshoots and dirt bike area and four-wheeler area and the like.
And some trails then that just have not really been maintained, one of which you had your argument with the tree with, and
Yeah,
got smacked
in the face.
in the face.
Should have taken a saw.
Had to do a little first aid in the bush in the rain.
So that one, you come out of Port Colborne and there's a flower factory. I've forgotten the name of the...
Robin Hood.
But you pick the blue trail up from the start, don't you? And then just winds through the woods.
Yeah, and then you pop out on the canal if you want to, here and there.
And if it's muddy and wet, or you've got someone who's a beginner, it's quite good because you can easily get out and then ride up the side of the canal and then go back in again and have another go. And there's also the little lunar landscape area.
What's that now?
Where those trials bikes were, or
The four-wheelers and...
like the... It's like old... I guess it could be from the canal or a quarry, or there's basically piles of kind of loose shingle that where the motorcycles and four-wheelers have been. There's like tracks that go up and down them, and some are rocky, and you could...
It's like a little BMX park, but I suppose shared with...
Yeah, I guess so.
Motorcycle and four-wheelers?
All in the shadow of the Robin Hood factory.
We just sort of popped out and had no idea it was there. It's like a whole nother land.
But you could easily spend a couple of hours there teaching somebody skills if they had none. It'd be a fairly safe place to learn how to roll down hills and up hills.
Remember I said it was great for teaching and learning?
There you go. Just not great when it's wet, that's the only thing, because it was raining when we were there, and it felt a little bit like the lunar landscape, like the moon. Also, I think there was the dirt bikes were quite noisy there, and then there's the pickup truck going round and round, and it was all fine. But then when you go north of that area, then you pick up, there's one or two trails to pick up. There's one goes up kind of one side of the woods, and one goes up the other, comes back the other side, and I think both of those trails were pretty good fun, weren't they?
Yeah.
One's called
Wade's World.
Yeah, and then again, I can't remember what the other one was called. There's no sign for it. You have to kind of look for it, and it's a little bit more exposed than you think. There's a couple of corners on there where you suddenly find yourself quite close to a steep drop on your left. And then, what did we do next?
Then the next day we went to the place near Balls Falls.
Yeah.
Which was the good old part of the Brucey Trail.
Anything
escarpment there.
Mountain bike related on the Bruce Trail is hard, I think it's fair to say. Or
in our experience thus far,
it is a slightly different level, and the hills are steep and short, and the rock and roots are difficult and tricky. But again, we
did it in the rain.
I was going to say we rode in a downpour.
Whole other level.
Which doesn't help. But it is spectacular and
so gorgeous. Oh my goodness.
Even in the rain, you can kind of get a handle of how sort of beautiful the area is and the potential it has for riding. Also, even though the rocks are a little bit slippery when they're wet, at least it is a decent place to ride in the wet. It wasn't terribly overwhelmingly muddy, was it?
No, No, not overwhelmingly muddy, just hard. It's really tough to right out of the gates, but I do find that once you keep at it for a little bit, by 45 minutes or an hour in, you start to kind of get a bit of a groove going. But you got to be willing to kind of stick with it, the frustration and the off and off and off and on and off for quite some time before, at least for me anyways.
Yeah, and I think it's depends what sort of riding you like. It's definitely more cross-country-ish. There's very little downhill. There's very little kind of continual descent. It's quite flat, or the downhill's so short and rocky that you sort of down and then climbing back up before you know it, really. Which,
would you say it's just full-on technical?
Yeah, it is very technical. I do think though, if you rode there 10 times, in a 2 or 3 week period, you'd suddenly find it much easier and know where you're going a lot better. I think it was wet first time we've been there. Navigating's quite brutal as well. Like, if you're relying on something like trail forks, it's quite difficult because you're constantly stopping and checking because you don't want to end up on the Bruce hiking trail, because I think the hikers can be a little bit anti-mountain biking in that area, by what one of the farmers was saying. Do you have anything to add?
I was actually going to slightly disagree with that. Not in general, but at that place and just that day, nobody got too ticked at us.
No, that's true. Probably because we were going 1 mile an hour.
And I thought that the farmer guy had a pretty great attitude. He was pretty open and inclusive to everyone, the hikers and walkers and bikers. Horse riders. He was just kind of everybody needs, just everybody should use it and get along.
Yeah.
Just get on with it. Which is not always the norm or the usual attitude or outlook.
Yeah, I would agree. What about foraging potential?
Well, if we go back to the beginning of our first go at Short Hills on that weird 30-degree day, we did hit some jackpots of tons of ramps, and as well, which we've never found before. I still don't even know what for sure they are, but to me they are they would have been like wild onions.
Yeah. Like salad onions, spring onions.
Yeah, but quite tough. Remember, I grilled them whole and they were hard to swallow. You needed to cut them.
Yeah.
But delicious and quite potent. I made some pesto out of them. Anywho, so that's a tangent. Story for another day.
And what are ramps for people that don't know?
Wild leeks.
They're very garlicky tasting.
Quite. Also quite potent.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was several weeks ago, and I'm quite curious to go back to that area and see what else we see in terms of wild edibles. And then the one north of Port Colborne, Mud Lake, whatever we're calling it, I don't know if it was just so rainy and it was difficult to look that day. And the Bruce Trail one, I don't know. I mean, to me, that looks like Mushroom City. But we're still at the beginning of the season here. We're just starting to see the first spring mushrooms I've found in the last only week.
It's a bit higher up as well, that.
It's a bit higher up. And I must say, though, today back at Short Hills, I was surprised to see nothing. But again, to be fair, not the best days when it's pouring rain and rocky and rooty and slippery as
It was.
As it was, it's very difficult to ride and look for things at the same time. So, quite possible I missed some stuff, but.
So that means leads us on to today, I guess. So another bit of the Bruce Trail, but the trails north of Short Hills that kind of tuck under St Catharines University. I looked on Trailforks and seen this kind of little, well, not little, it's quite a big area, and there's a lot of
features?
Yeah, and trail building gone on, but the blacks, for example, are just steep, and then the blues are very twisty and turny, and there's a lot of features. And today was hard, like even getting up the first hill was nearly impossible, because it's just, is it clay or what is it? It's like a mud that kind of,
it's clay mud for sure.
I don't know if it's because it's baked hard in the sun and then it's rained on it, so it's super slick, but it's just not very grippy really.
You can't even walk on it.
No. But apart from that, I mean, I guess you can see the area has a bit of potential. I just wonder if it's going to get super busy on a normal kind of warm sunny day. But we had a few bonuses. We saw some American goldfinches.
Oh, they were sweet, so sweet. Many blue jays.
We saw a little fella sat up a tree.
Oh, the raccoon.
Yeah, who was kind of sat on a branch looking at us, which was interesting. What did you say, blue jay? What else did we see? Anything else?
Well, we've seen a ton of cardinals this year.
Yeah.
But I definitely saw a few woodpeckers, and then a swallow.
Oh yeah, on the fence.
And then there was something else, I think, that we didn't know what it was.
Yeah, with the white bum.
Which is unusual that you're pretty on it with your birds.
I need to look it up maybe. And there wasn't many people riding today. Some of the trails, like the blacks, are just a bit steep and on wet roots and wet rock and muddy and slippery.
We did go down a few. I had some good practice at that today, if nothing else, I found.
Yeah.
Short but sweet.
It's definitely somewhere I would revisit, I think, on the right day. Yeah, and then the people generally down this way are pretty friendly, as you said. Other mountain bikers, I don't know, less so maybe, but we saw a kid, he was alright, but the older guy was a bit strange. The weather was wet and grim. It's now warm and sunny on the way back into the city, which is slightly frustrating.
Yep. Especially as we were hoping for one more little downpour to wash a little bit of filth off the BC Clets on the back.
Yeah, well.
Excuse me.
And then tomorrow's nice, isn't it, I think?
Probably.
Anything else you want to add to our little Niagara?
I look forward to going back there and riding in some dry weather, because we kind of haven't yet. Every time we've been, it's been kind of pouring rain, with the exception of the first time, but it had
been raining.
It was super muddy, so even though it was like a beautiful sunny warm day, the trails were quite muddy. But yeah, so I look forward to trying again for another experience.
Okay.
A slightly less frustrating one, but still good.
Yeah, it was
just
a bit
hard.
frustrating. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, well that's that for this one, and then maybe we'll be back soon. I guess you can't salute on here.
Peace.